Hey folks, this is Lil Guillotine, and you're here. I guess this is like the Lil Guillotine podcast, and then
Yes.
we're like
Right
Brad
now it
was
is,
just saying,
yes.
we're trying to find a DSA podcast, and
Uh-huh.
maybe this will turn into that. Although I still will be doing other stuff
Yeah.
in addition to that. And I have with me Brad LeBaron
Yo, what's up? How's it going?
from Revolover Audio Studios, and then I have Dayna Long
Hey.
from DSA, and anywhere else you want to be known from.
DSA, organizing in Madison. That's
Yeah,
sufficient.
grassroots.
How long have
organizing.
you been organizing in Madison?
Since like 2013, something like that. Better
Yeah.
part of a decade, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you're a seasoned organizer at this point, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I met Dayna like 5 years ago, I think, and then we were organizing together against this brutal sexual assault that happened on the bike path on the east side, and we did a huge response. I helped with that, and Dayna, of course, led that up, and that was sort of how we had our organizing experience together.
That's how I first heard about Dayna. Before I met Dayna.
It was called
Yeah, that was before I was organizing.
Take
but-
back the bike path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like an homage to the
Take back the night. Yeah,
Right.
the Take Back the Night marches of the 70s against sexual assault. Yeah, that's how we met, I think.
Yeah.
And it's certainly how I got involved in the International Socialist Organization, and we were members of that together for a while.
Yeah. I didn't know that was the first thing that got you involved with them. So you were on your own at that point?
I was, yeah. So I was a member of the National Organization for Women, which
Okay.
was a pretty conservative group for me. I think they do good work, but for me it wasn't a good political fit, and I left. I'd left earlier in 2015 when they endorsed Hillary Clinton for president and made that like a big push for their membership. I was actually like the president of the Wisconsin chapter of the National Organization for Women.
Yeah.
And when it became clear that I was going to need to toe this line of, political support for Hillary Clinton, who I, deplored, I left the organization.
Yeah.
And was looking, I'd been around the ISO a little bit before then, and I'd gone to the socialism conference, but it was really working with an ISO member, Liam, on the Take Back the Bike Path stuff that made me feel like I couldn't just be sort of a lone grassroots organizer. I needed to be a part of an organization, and that was the one that made the most sense to me.
Yeah, and I actually had a few friends that went to that were really inspired by it. Like, I wasn't quite into the activism stuff yet, but it was really a really cool thing.
That's great to hear.
That you did. Yeah.
And we met, and I met Brad through the International Socialist Organization. This is like
Yep.
old hat stuff. Y'all hear about this every time. And also our last guest too. And you met also Brad from ISO, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And Brian, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, who was here last time.
Yeah, we all go back.
Yeah, and then so that's an interesting thing, and this always has to be discussed because
Keeping those relationships among different organizers is very important if you're gonna keep movements going.
Yeah, and I agree with you that like I feel like I need to be in an organization personally, but my politics have definitely changed since leaving the ISO, because sort of the line there is that like building the organization is building the revolution, and sort of doing anything else sort of, they wouldn't say like counter-revolutionary, but it's like not really effective way to build the revolution.
Yeah.
Right.
And not the focus.
Right. And
Yeah.
so, but I think it's totally legitimate for folks who are grassroots organizers who aren't a part of any organization. It's like, as long as you're affecting positive social change that's lasting and has impact, I don't think you necessarily need to be in an organization. I think there's all kind of different ways to do it. I personally feel like it's a tool for building political base in the community, even though folks in the community don't necessarily need to be in the organization. I don't know. It's like a useful tool in my experience, in my opinion.
Well, I think all around it builds community. You know what I mean? At the very basis, you learn how to interact with people that are not your friends and family, or coworkers. You know what I mean? And forcing yourself to figure stuff out with those people, and which is a challenge for some people more than it is for others. but it's something that you should try at some point, you know.
Right. I mean, I think there's big advantages to being a part of an organization. The weight that you can have as an organization is different than what you can do as an individual. And I really found that in organizing for the Take Back the Bike Path March all those years ago. That was hard. That was a really hard week. And there were a couple of moments in particular where I really felt the weight of that organizing by myself. For example, I remember one day I got a phone call from the police asking me, what our route was going to be and, did I want them there? They called my cell phone. I don't know how they got my number.
Yeah.
The whole thing was alarming. And, I was by myself.
Creepy.
I didn't have an organization.
Yeah.
There wasn't anybody that I felt, I could defer to on this or, there were a couple of moments like that where I really wanted the full weight of an organization building something with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's usually beneficial to your confidence and actually going through with it and making everything work. When you have people together to lean on, so you're not doing 100%.
Right.
Every little percent that you're getting help with really helps.
Pool knowledge as well. But then again, highlighting the differentiation in reliance on organization. So don't necessarily believe that in doing community work and political grassroots organizing that the goal should be to build the organization. And the one poignant anecdote that sticks out from that experience with the Take Back the Bike Path and sort of when I started kind of splitting ways with sort of ISO the line or whatnot is that I felt we met once and we were talking about starting anti-sexual assaults organization or group or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was discouraged by folks inside of the ISO from doing that, even though I was able to, I never got an opportunity to do it in a meeting or whatever, but I was able to lean on Leninist theory to argue that, that's something that it's opportune time to. So it's it wasn't necessarily anti-Leninist to want to start an organization, but I was discouraged from starting anything besides, they wanted us to just bring people inside of the ISO, and I didn't necessarily think that was the right move.
Right. So. Yeah. I mean, now that you're talking about it, I'm remembering, too, that they actually discouraged a bunch of their membership from coming to the Take Back the Bike Path March, the branch committee at the time, because there was a meeting that night.
Right.
And so I think there were only 5 people from the ISO who were allowed to go to the march.
Yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah.
Well, and I remember, I just, on the same kind of line of thinking, there was a struggle with getting enough student members as well in the time that I was in there. So that was a big focus as well as it is a campus organization or whatever. And so, a lot of the energy went into that, which was I, on one hand was that's, I understand, why that's happening. But, on the other hand, I was, thinking about I want to, see how we can do stuff in the community and this, that, and whatever. But, yeah.
I remember you came in and one of the first questions you asked was what kind of, it was mutual aid, but you were what kind of, I think you used the word charity maybe, but you were talking about when do we feed people and things like that, and they're oh no we don't fuck with that. But another thing that stood out from that experience was there was Brandy Grayson who was gonna talk there, I think, and didn't end up doing it because it was pouring rain that night, and it was shitty, and we still got thousands of people out to march. It was great turnout. But I told an ISO comrade that I was really looking forward to hearing Brandy speak, and that I really loved the way she speaks, and I think she's really motivational. And this ISO comrade, who I'm gonna remain unnamed, was pulling the line that I should be rooting for ISO speakers simply because they're in the same organization. And it's so then they were making the argument that I shouldn't have a personal opinion, and it just should be organizational speak, and which was really cultish to me, and that was really stark and startling to me that they said that. So anyways, so you, Dayna, you were in the ISO until they broke up. Is that right? Or
yeah. So like, to no one's surprise, after hearing us talk about it, the ISO's not an organization anymore.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, this is probably the most we've actually talked about it up to this point
I have to say,
on the podcast.
I don't want to, I'm not really interested in being on the episode where we like break down the ISO's
no, for sure. Well, that's what I was. Well, it was just, it's interesting. Well,
no, we did that in the episode.
We have talked about it a little bit,
about the breakdown.
Well, it was at first, we definitely didn't want to even bring it up with anyone because it was so, it was so fresh, and I don't know, it's we've talked a little more about it recently with a few people, but it is one of those things that's very everyone has a very personal stake in the whole thing. So
the only reason I bring it up was not to talk about it and expand upon it, but was actually just to ask, okay, so then did you, after the ISO like dissolved, did you go right into the DSA after that?
No, it took me a while.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think like most people have pretty complicated feelings about the end of the ISO, like a full recognition of its unhealthy practices, and especially those that I was a part of, perpetuating in the org, and also like a real gratitude for the stuff that I learned in the organization, and like the deep Marxist education that I got from the ISO. It would not have happened if I hadn't been a member of this group.
Yeah.
So like
definitely not for me either.
Yeah. So I
it was my introduction.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I have got this whole like mix of feelings about it, and it took me a while after the dissolution to even feel confident enough to want to be in an organization again. And I would say that I'm still pretty cynical about organizations, and especially at the time I was worried about, is this organization at all prepared to deal with, sexual harassment, sexual assault? I don't necessarily know that it is any organization adequately prepared to deal with those things within the organization? I'm not sure. And that's for me, it was a very like heavy concern in terms of joining something new, but I did eventually join DSA several months after the ISO dissolved. It made the most sense for me out of the organizations in Madison that I could be a part of.
Yeah. I always would run into DSA folks that were super cool for the past several years, so I was always hoping that they would there would be a growing number of people doing that, but yeah, it was I think that it was one of those things where even the ISO had to reckon with that post Me Too movement. They had to also deal with the fact that they were not dealing with that stuff properly.
Oh yeah, I was talking earlier about this. It was about like when organizations rely on hierarchical power structures, where the power and the leadership like sort of has heavy control over the organization. What tends to happen is if there's any kind of crisis, all that stuff comes to a head. They tend to have problems and fall apart easier than horizontally organized structures. And this is one of the things about the DSA that I am impressed with. I actually didn't realize sort of how horizontal they were, at least compared to the International Socialist Organization, until I joined and started doing stuff. But yeah, I sort of was really reluctant to join as well, and I think I've been a member for 5 or 6 months. And basically what attracted me was just the fact that what didn't attract me was, okay, here's an organization that's heavily into electoral politics, which I'm not into at all.
Yeah.
But what did attract me was, okay, well, these folks who are in the DSA are consistently showing up and like doing things in the community, and they're not doing it in a sectarian way that the ISO was, where you'd show up and like piggyback and sort of be a parasite on movements, and then show up with your newspaper and go there and hold it up and be like, oh, join the ISO.
I disagree a little bit with your characterization of the ISO's involvement in movements. I think that the ISO provided major organizing infrastructure that didn't always exist in moments where that was really needed. So like I could think of several examples where like if we hadn't been there to provide like the people power and sort of like the organizing capacity that we developed, a thing wouldn't have happened. But yeah. I also agree with like the characterization of how sectarian. I think that like once you leave your sectarian organization, you're just blown away by how friendly you feel towards people in other organizations all of a sudden. You're like, you're able to see folks as comrades, even though they're not in your organization. And for me, that's been the best part of not being in the ISO anymore is recognizing, like, I've got all these comrades who are in different organizations than me. We're not in competition. I want the same things they do. And being in an organization made me feel like we were competing for, limited resources or something. And it wasn't good.
Yeah. Right. And I talk about this a little bit too, more than, on other episodes, but from my religious background or whatever, I kind of had that in my mind before I got into the ISO, because I was like, from my organizational experience from the right in the, pro-life movement, anti-choice movement, that I was a part of, I got to, I guess, see that, in a really dark way. So, I thought, but what I would say though is, although they were similar to those people in a lot of ways, they were fighting for so many more important things and in a much more, justified fashion. And they taught me a lot of things. And I think that all people that are drawn to organizing are going to be similar in some ways. Just for that passion to do something for the community. But organizing is also hard, and egos are a factor, and you have to work around all that and do the whole balancing act.
So yeah, you got like DSA members who are changing brake lights on folks' cars who they couldn't afford it necessarily on their own. There's like DSA free meals and stuff. DSA in Madison was showing up to like the no cops in school stuff in a major way and derail the jail. And they weren't looking to necessarily build the DSA while they were doing it. And so that impressed me. So I joined. And also there's like, I consider myself an anarchist nowadays. And there's this large trend of libertarian socialist caucus. So there's definitely some anarchists in the DSA. Also, like I listen to a lot of anarchist podcasts, and there's constantly comrades who are going on there from the DSA talking about the great work that they're doing, anti-prison work and shit like that. Okay, so I mentioned that I was going to use that segue as like the ISO when they come, because they would use socialist worker as a way. I mean, not everyone would do it, but mostly they would use it as a way to kind of recruit people into the ISO in movements.
That's one of the things I think I miss the most.
Yeah.
Selling the paper?
Well, no, the existence of the paper.
Okay.
And because I got a really cool experience when I got to write a story for it, because it was the first time I wrote since like high school. And it was a really good way to make you feel, valued if you had like some, thoughts that you wanted to get off your chest, and you had a, constructive, place to do that.
I agree to a certain point, but then there was a couple times when I wrote articles
that paper sales that are really grueling.
There was also a couple times I wrote articles that didn't line up with the politics coming from the top, and I was like denied. No, we're not going to publish that. And I was looking for at least, why don't you like help me edit it so that it. But I was just denied, and I was that disillusioned me. I didn't like that.
Oh,
so Dayna,
you're the opposite experience.
So Dayna, you're the editor of like
of
RedMadison, right? Which is a publication of Madison area Democratic Socialists of America.
Correct. Editor's like sort of a strong term. I have been preferring chair of the unofficial working group that's putting RedMadison together. But in essence, I'm the editor of that publication.
That's cool. So, it's not a official committee yet, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah, we haven't gone through the process of sort of codifying our group as an official working group, and I don't know that we will necessarily.
Oh yeah. So that's a cool publication that is being consistently published nowadays, right? And so y'all
So you guys put out your first one when again?
Our first issue came out in January. I think January 18th or 19th was like the pub date, and we're gonna put out our second issue in a couple days.
That's exciting.
Oh, that's rad.
It's very cool.
Yeah. I was just checking out the website earlier, and it looks pretty good. Like, I read the article about the F35's that I was actually very curious about before that, because, I've only heard murmurings of it for the most part, and seen the signs and heard. I think I heard one time.
Right.
But yeah, no, it's a nice little. It's got a cool section called Dear Kami that I'm a big fan of.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Dear was it Dear
Abby?
Dear Abby.
Dear
yeah.
Abby. Yeah. I just like the format of that in general.
I like the fact that you're bringing communism here, because I don't necessarily know that all DSA members would identify as communists. I think it's pretty prevalent here in Madison. Like, it's pretty far left DSA. So yeah, I like that it's RedMadison and that you have this the commie shit going down, because I definitely also identify as like an anti-authoritarian, non-hierarchical communist as well.
Yeah. So one of the first emails that we got in response to the newsletter was from a comrade in DSA who said, hey, this is great work. I don't think we should call ourselves communists. Here's why, like several sentences about here's why. And I'm going to, I followed up with this individual, and I think that we're going to both write our disagreeing, our differing opinions on this topic for the newsletter. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because it came up right away from the opposite direction. Somebody who didn't like Dear Kami, but I agree.
For some people, it's that one of those loaded words still, but like, I think it's fun. I think it's like, if you're using it in context, you don't, you're not talking about like, the worst of Soviet Union, whatever. You're talking about actual communism, which is not a bad thing. But yeah, like it is. That's. I understand why someone would respond immediately and be like, "Oh no, commie," but I think it's fun. I think because it fits with the Dear Abby thing too. I mean,
right?
What else would it be?
Yeah, and in some respects, I think it's kind of tongue in cheek, but like I also think it's important politically, because DSA is a Big Tent organization.
Yeah.
We're allowed and encouraged to have differing political ideas. So it, really runs the spectrum from folks who are like, oh, I would never call myself a communist or even a socialist. I'm a, democratic socialist. And then there's folks.
Oh, yeah. The distinction.
Yeah. Some of us are communists, and we're not shy about it. So.
Yeah. And for the horizontal structure, as you were saying, like that's very important that you're all able to maintain that individual outlook, I think.
It's at least a feature of the organization.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, and plus, just a side note, I mean, commie is one of those terms that if you are a less leftist of any stripe, that word is thrown at you a lot. Regardless of how legitimate it is, even if you are like, a Democrat voting for Hillary Clinton, someone might call you a commie because they want to, throw shade at you.
That's right.
But like, that's why I think it's it's one of those things that we need to take back.
Remnants
all for Dear Commie here.
Of the Cold War aside, there's definitely many folks who identify as communists who have excellent political positions, like Rosa Luxemburg. There's folks like like Angela Davis. You got intersectional communism, Communist Party. What is it? I like CLR James, who was a Trinidadian Black Liberation intersectional communist.
Well, I was gonna say we actually talked about this a little bit on a previous episode. I can't remember his name right now. He was Maoist.
Yeah,
remember that?
Narco-Maoists.
Yeah, that was an interesting conversation, because we talked a lot about the choice of words in naming conventions of himself, and he was able to defend his position quite well, and it's you should listen to other people if they want to share their stuff.
Yeah, that was Brock Barber. I don't remember the episode number.
Brock.
What's
going on, Brock? And
then there's also sort of just quickly on that same line, there's a differentiation between like hierarchical communism and sort of just non-hierarchical communism, because there's folks who don't necessarily identify as like a Trotskyite, who still want to identify as a communist, but aren't into hierarchy and then more into horizontalism. And a lot of folks will use, like a lot of anarchists will talk about just political economy, political economics, which is sort of using the same sort of along the same line without completely avoiding any of the socialist or communist word. I personally like to be called a communist. Also, I guess some of that is just like the rebel in me wanting to, because socialists in the United States are not definitely not mainstream, although getting there. But of course, in Europe, you have French Socialist Party, which are huge imperialist, racist fuckfaces.
Right.
Yeah. And we also have dudes. Well, there's one dude that popped up in Madison that was trying to do something like that. Nationalist, socialist thing.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I think right now, too, so many people are so quick to explain to other folks that Bernie Sanders is not a communist, which I agree that Bernie Sanders is not a communist.
Yeah.
But in doing that, they're saying, hey, don't worry, it's not this terrible thing, communism. It's this fuzzy thing that's FDR, New Deal, liberalism. And I like communism compared to, FDR, New Deal, liberalism. I think communism is, when we're talking about socialism in those terms, I'm excited about it. And I think that young people who are not afraid of the stigma, of the Cold War and the Soviet Union are going to be excited about it, and we should talk about it instead of, constantly walking back from that line.
Yeah. I think that we're getting better at talking about politics. At least if you talk to a lot of millennials, they're pretty. I think the terminology that we're using is getting more robust, I guess. Kind of I don't know, I've always thought that when I think back to World War II, World War I times or whatever, they were somewhat more in tune with political terminology, and then during the Cold War it all kind of vanished and all of it was misused, and that's been a huge point of contention since. And I think that it is a step in the right direction that people are calling themselves democratic socialists. Or even having socialists in the, title. But, we need to also be clear that we are definitely more about the socialist part of that, when that we want to get more and more of those things. We shouldn't be limiting ourselves by being, kowtowed by those terms,
Anti-capitalists. So, so bringing it back to the RedMadison publication, let's see, what is your reasons for starting the newsletter in the first place, do you think?
So, I got together with a comrade in DSA, and we talked about a newsletter, and for us, it came down to really feeling like Madison is lacking in analysis and commentary on the things that are going on in our city. And I felt that way for a long time. I felt that way when I was in the ISO, and the ISO sort of, I think, didn't have a very local focus unless you were in one of the bigger cities. So if you were in New York or Chicago, there was local stuff that you could tap into. If you weren't, you just weren't spending your time thinking about local issues. But there are important decisions being made about all of our lives in Madison every day. And, the folks making those decisions have gotten off pretty easy because we don't have any sort of left media in the city that can provide a left analysis of the things that are going on. And so we wanted to provide that, first of all, just to, sharpen up the politics in the city. On top of that, because DSA is a big tent organization where all of these different political tendencies and political ideas can coexist, it's hard sometimes, I think, to come to a conclusion, a shared conclusion as an organization, or to come up with a shared analysis as a group, even it's not always essential to, but on some points we should agree, and where we don't agree, we should debate it out until the sides are clear, I think. And so it was also a desire to provide a place for people in DSA to explore ideas, debate, and have some disagreements in a way that could be read by everyone. And the other part of it is we've got these once a month meetings. If you're a DSA member, you go to the meeting once a month. There's not a lot of time to discuss the decisions that we make at the meeting. They sort of operate as a series of announcements almost. Some of the times, not. So we thought it would be helpful for DSA members to have a space to share announcements about elections that are coming up, or maybe the chapter wants to vote on this and somebody can make the case for it in RedMadison. And, we've only had one issue published so far, but that's the dream, is that it will become that kind of space for Madison and for DSA internally as well.
Yeah, become like a blueprint for what other local DSAs can do for their local stuff, that's going on in their community. Yeah, I think that's a really, really great thing to work towards, because we do have, like, Madison's got like endless like talk about quote leftist stuff, but often it's like not, it's just a little bit to the left, and,
right, if it's not outright neoliberalism, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Even, I mean, I love WRT, don't get me wrong, but it's still towing the line a lot of the time.
I think WRT is great, and you can actually get interesting information there.
Yeah,
I think there's so many news articles that come out. I don't want to.
Well, they kind of self-censor in a way.
There are newspaper articles that are basically like a press release from the police department. They don't question anything that the police have reported about an incident. They don't ask questions about it, and you can't find more information.
Yeah.
There's just a limited selection of viewpoints available in Madison, and it allows politicians to get away with doing stuff and presenting it as like the left option, as the best we could possibly do. And it's because there's not somebody there saying, actually, this is wrong, and here's a left critique of this decision.
It shouldn't just be the loudest leftist in the city that's going to, get the attention. Like, that's never, the best path.
I like how you say that you should hash out your political differences till you know what the sides are, and not necessarily until everyone's on the same page, because that was sort of my experience in other organizations.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you don't agree with the politics coming from the top, then you have to leave, and people got kicked out for that. So that's dope. And then also, to your point, Brad, I did definitely, in the Socialist Worker, since that's what I was talking about, is the ISO, I definitely had some good articles that I was very proud of. Okay. But there was just a couple times when, and so on that point, so like, how can people contribute to RedMadison? Yeah.
Oh yeah, can you do? How do you get a hold of Dear Commie?
Well, if you have a question for Dear Commie, gosh, I have to remember our email address on the
sorry.
fly. It's RedMadisonDSA@gmail.com. RedMadisonDSA@gmail.com. You can send us a pitch if you want, if you'd like to write an article. We're encouraging people right now to keep it to between 1,000 and 1,500 words max. But we're interested in people's, political pieces. Currently, we're soliciting, especially from members of DSA. We would like to get this operating as sort of a DSA publication. But certainly, I guess I'm the editor of the thing, and I'm open to other folks outside of DSA also write, because I think that there also is not a place in Madison for the left to have a disagreement or a debate. Like, there's no stage on which organizations can share differing analyses or sort of like a differing program. I think that would be helpful too. Like, I want to know what Socialist Alternative has to say about X thing that happened at the city level, and I think it would be helpful if a member wanted to write something up and share it with RedMadison. Yeah,
definitely. That's one thing that we were trying to put together for a minute, like members from several different organizations in the same room for a podcast. That's something that we'd still love to do if we can get the people to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was born, of that idea that, like, we need to get these people in the same room. We need to get these people talking and, debating and, I guess, well, also sharpening their activism and, how well they can do in a community. It's something that we're learning more and more as younger people, I think. I don't know if it's something that, like, it used to be in America and then it went away for a while or something. But there's definitely a hopeful move from some of the millennials to try to, get involved. But, we are definitely in an uphill struggle here. So, any help is absolutely needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how much work would you say it is to make this thing happen? Is it pretty tough? Like, how many hours are you putting in or something like that?
I mean, it's a fair amount of work. We have usually two organizing. We've had 2 months now, sort of average it out. I would say it takes like 2 organizing meetings to put together an edition. And then it takes, 6 or 7 people writing 6 or 7 articles. We have 2 rounds of edits. The articles are going through currently. That might change. It's worked so far. And then there's, the time of uploading everything to the website. And then
it takes time.
God bless our comrade Matt, who put together this slick PDF. I think that took a long time, but it looks really beautiful. And I'm very proud of like how the website looks and how this PDF came out. And that's all a lot of work too. I know that they spent quite a bit of time on that.
Yeah.
No doubt.
The PDF is important, I think, is that was like the one critique I had for socialist workers. Like there wasn't as much access. Well, I mean, there was like the website or whatever, but like you can open a PDF on like a Kindle or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, that's like a way that people can access it very easily. So that's a very good move.
And just in case I didn't mention it, because I've been talking about socialist worker a lot, that was the publication of the International Socialist Organization, which I believe is no longer a thing.
No.
So then I guess, you're talking about PDFs being
Haymarket's
useful.
still a thing, right?
Haymarket's
Yes.
still
Okay.
going. Yeah, they still have the monthly book club and everything.
Yeah.
Owned by the workers now, I guess.
Cool.
Which is dope.
Yeah.
So is print media obsolete, you think? Or
Like a printed newspaper?
yeah, are y'all like printing this?
We're not. We talked about it,
Okay.
and I think that what we'll do is so we've got this nice PDF. I think we will occasionally print a version if we've got like a good reason to coming up. Like we know DSA is going to be at an event. We want to table at the event. We're going to have a few copies of this nice PDF to hand out.
Yeah.
But for now, our focus is really on the website and on an e-newsletter, and that's sort of like exclusively how we're distributing it at this time. I like the idea of being able to print something out, but I also think, like I show up at a meeting and there's like 8 piles of paper at the door of the meeting, and I'm supposed to take each one of these flyers and like, I can't speak for everyone, but it ends up in a crumpled mess in my bag, and it's not useful to me or to the people who paid for it. So
Or you take a picture of it and throw it away.
that would be clever. It's not even what I do. Yeah.
Yeah. I tend to take a picture of the piles and not pick any of the paper up.
But yeah, that's like a really important thing. Like technology is continuously changing, and to stay ahead of that game is really important. If you want to, get that, that education into people's hands,
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And so, I guess that was. Let's see. I guess some other questions here. What ways? Oh yeah. How about this one? We kind of touched on some of these points, but I guess I'll just bluntly ask this. How do you envision this newsletter being used as a tool for organizing? You mentioned printing it up where we're like tabling, so that I guess so folks like know the kind of analysis we're doing and sort of the involvement in work that we're doing. Is that the idea?
Right. Yeah. I think it is also a place where I hope that folks in DSA and not in DSA will make the case for what they think people should be doing. So one thing that I really miss about Socialist Worker and also being in the ISO is that there was, constant discussion about what's the priority for socialists right now? What should a socialist be spending their time on? And again, like I would love to know what the folks in, Socialist Alternative or Party for Socialism and Liberation think socialists in the world should be doing beyond just joining those organizations. What is your plan for intervention in the city of Madison, and what do you think folks should be focusing on? What are the big movements that really need all of our attention? I hope that people will write pieces like that, making the case for areas of work that folks should be involved in.
Yeah.
And I also think it's a place for outlining an approach to particular issues. So I wrote an article for the January edition about the wheel tax that the Common Council voted on to fund improvements that they want to make to Metro Transit. Instead of, and they're very limited by the state for all of these reasons. They're very limited by the state in terms of how they raise money to pay for stuff like transportation. But, you know, a regressive tax that hits every family in Madison.
And what's a wheel tax?
Yeah. So a wheel tax is it's a tax that it's an addition basically to your registration fee, your vehicle registration fee. So it's basically an additional $40 every time you go to renew your plates and pay your registration fee. That
Every
will go
time?
to fund every time.
Oh,
So
geez.
it's jacked up to $153 now in Madison per vehicle. And we all know that hits some families harder than others, right? Like, that's not equal across every household in Madison.
Yeah.
But in all of the debate around the wheel tax in the mainstream press in Madison and at the Common Council even, you had only two sides. You had people who argued against the wheel tax, and largely because they don't ride transit, they don't need transit to be better, they don't really care. And then you had people who said transit's got to be better, and so we have to have this wheel tax. And my argument is, transit needs to be better, but we don't need a fucking wheel tax. We need, we need businesses in Madison to pay for transit to be better.
Yeah, why is it coming out of us, the working people's pockets when there's probably plenty of money elsewhere that can be diverted?
There's at least one billionaire here.
There's at least one billionaire. And on top of that, like, we used to recognize that conveying workers to their workplaces was the responsibility of the boss.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it I don't need to be at my job. My boss needs me to be at my job. So why am I the one paying for my transportation to my job? Why is anybody paying for their transportation to their job when the only reason they're being there is because their boss needs them to be there? The bosses should pay for it. But there's nobody staking out that side in Madison. So it looked like either you hate transit and don't want, improved transit, or you like transit and, we've got to have transit and it's got to be this, one shitty way. I think that socialists should be staking out better positions and winning people to those positions. And I think, like, providing guidance and an analysis on those issues is, a part of training folks and making, maybe I'm wrong. Somebody should write in to RedMadison to tell me that I'm wrong if they think so. But I think that's another way that we're organizing folks is by presenting better ideas than the ones that are commonly held up as the only options.
No doubt. I have a comrade in the General Defense Committee who's from France, and we had a conversation about just that, how all of the employers are expected to pay for the transit passes. It's still like privatized, it's not publicized, the transportation, but the employers are absolutely expected to pay for transit, and if they have to come from out of the country, then they're expected to pay for those train passes or reimburse them for gas and also maintenance on the vehicle and that's absolutely the employer's responsibility. It's just a given there. So okay, in your article that you're referring to, it's called False State of Austerity, right? So you mentioned austerity budget restrictions that sort of the state of Wisconsin has, and that the city council sort of uses as an excuse, or sort of takes as for granted state of affairs. So that's why they're able to, like, use this logic of we need to pass this these fees for transportation on to working class folks. So I'm just wondering, can you expand on, like, what sort of austerity measures that are coming from the state that are allowing this?
Definitely. So for one thing, the state has barred the formation of regional transit authorities. So that would be an entity that could set up and tax a region, implement a tax on a region to pay for transit throughout that region. So for example, it would make sense to have a Dane County Transit Authority, a regional transit authority that had that sort of jurisdiction over our whole region. We've got people who are commuting not only to Madison from these, like, outlying cities, but folks who are driving from Madison every day to get to places like Verona to work at Epic.
Middleton, for me.
Yeah. And there's no reason why the businesses and wealthy folks in these outlying communities shouldn't be paying for transit. They rely on it. They make money off of workers getting to their businesses. Via transit. They should be paying for the transit. But the state has barred the formation of regional transit authorities.
Oh, okay.
And they've also instituted limits on how much money the city can levy in taxes and so forth. Okay. And, I'm not an expert on all of these limitations, so I'll sort of leave it at that. But there's rules in place that do actually prevent the city from, raising funds in particular ways. That said, and this is the argument that I make in the article, I think that there are people in the city of Madison, politicians, certainly businesses, and, plenty of people who are happy for it to be that way. because it allows them to do what they want to do, which is shrink the role of government in all of our lives, shrink the amount of stuff that government is responsible for. And they have this very convenient built-in excuse provided by Republicans. Oh, well, we can't afford it anymore because of these limitations. And so we're going to shrink, the amount that government is responsible for and push more of it off onto people, and wheel taxes and so forth. I think it has paved the way for neoliberalism, which plenty of Democrats in Madison and throughout Dane County happily embrace.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's ironic for Republicans especially because they're usually so much anti-tax on people. You know what I mean? Like they're so that's one of the first things that people will complain about on the right is oh, I don't want them raising their taxes on me. But when it's coded in that kind of language, they don't care.
This is an interesting thing to me too. I actually think it's very brilliant on the part of the Republicans to implement stuff like this because it forces devious Democrats in places like Madison to push these unpopular policies like the wheel tax. The wheel tax is super unpopular. People hate that. Understandably, people hate it. $153 a year is a huge amount of money. There's so many ways that people would spend that money if they didn't have to spend it on stupid vehicle registration. So what the Republicans do is force Democrats to implement these deeply unpopular policies and reduce their own popularity. They hurt their own party by following these limitations that the Republicans have set for them. Yeah. And I feel like if they were clever, they would instead, or, if they were actually interested in doing right by folks, they would make a big, loud deal of the fact that they have been hemmed in by the Republicans. Like Shama Sawant, for example, in Washington, in Seattle. Seattle is hamstrung by many of the same limitations that we are in Madison. Washington is, arguably the most regressive state in the United States when it comes to taxes. Shama Sawant does not capitulate to the limitations set at the state level. She instead argues that things should be different. She, will fight for the city council in Seattle to preemptively pass policies that, if the state lifted its limitations, would make life for everyone in Seattle better. And so she points at the culprits of the hardship in Seattle, which is these limitations at the state, the businesses that are depriving cities of the taxes that rightfully belong to the people making the wealth there. She sort of directs folks in the right direction, and that's what we should be doing here. That's what progressives and socialists should be doing in Madison.
Grip the blue back tighter, screw the crew that's fighters and riders with AD black bias. We're Nazi igniters, so go grab your lighters. Unite us first and then divide us, burst their chin like Wobblies and Burger Dance. Might throttle at least 10 uprisings. They model these pumped up high rises. Thank God there's the Pilsen Alliance. They caught all those who gentrifies it. Make problems for huge bougie tycoon. Free the Stansted 15. Indict the ministry. Send Toya clemency. She rides by Judge the crew. But killer pigs roam free. Around the clock on the block, Dr. Shock Doctor. You vibe with line down with Sky Mob and French Squadron.
Actually voicing those things and not just giving another inch, because that's what we've been doing for decades at this point on the left or in the Dems or whatever is just like the abortion thing is a prime example. The fact that we even call it the pro-life movement and not the anti-choice movement, for instance, it's one of those things that for so long, Democrats were like, oh, this should be this is a terrible thing. Abortion's a terrible thing. It should be a last resort, but it's still a right. Instead of just being like, this is a right, and just unequivocally, making that stand. Instead, getting further and further and further from the center that they claim to, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm a centrist Democrat or whatever, but it's like, you're not really. Yeah. You're not really in the center. Yeah. The center is shifted.
Right.
I hear a lot of people using neoliberalism to describe new liberals and referring to people who are Democrats, but also into the shrinking of the state in people's everyday lives and the shrinking of the social services and the social safety net. But it's like you described, there's the Republican neoliberals who use the arguments of non-taxation against businesses and then hand it off to the Democrats who do the personal taxation
And the
aspect of it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's clever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah, that was a good kind of going over the article you wrote. I like that idea. There was another article in there I thought was really great, which you mentioned, Brad,
F35's.
and you read, that was written by our comrade Alan Ruff, who's in the DSA and also used to be in Solidarity and also does a show on WRT-FM every Thursday at noon called The Public Affair, which is really great. It's like some hardcore communist theory going down. And there was this dope. We got a situation here. But there was this quote in RedMadison that was poignant because it's they're trying to bring these, war jets here in Madison, and there's been a lot of resistance from the community against it. Here's this quote from RedMadison. It goes, "Other enthusiasts, among them numbers of observably well-organized military personnel, veterans, and others, repeatedly claim the F-35's will provide for our defense and security, and that increased noise levels should be celebrated as the sound of freedom."
Disgusting.
And then he goes on to talk about, that's the part I actually missed. I thought I got that too, where he talks about the only kind of trick, because they're talking about like trickle down economics that's going to bring jobs to Madison, which is really just a
temporary
a drop in the bucket when it comes to the
Yeah.
economy, and also I guess like the military jobs too. But he talks about the only trickle down that's going to be happening is the PFAS that are going to be leaking into the water system here in Madison.
Yeah, Starkweather Creek goes into Lake Monona.
Yeah. Wait, can you expand on PFAS, what that is real quick?
Sure. They're a class of forever chemicals that stick around in the environment and also in our bodies for a ridiculously long amount of time. And they've been linked to all kinds of health problems for humans and for animals. Living creatures who ingest them have health problems. And they, are used in firefighting foams. They're extremely water resistant chemicals. And so they're used in firefighting foams, which have been used a ton at Truex Field for firefighting training, and for putting out actual fires related to, aircraft and so forth. And it's a hugely contaminated site, and it's been leaching water into Starkweather Creek, which is now testing at pretty high levels for PFAS contamination.
With the the water tables rising or whatever the last couple of years too, that is going to be more and more of a problem.
Yeah, good point. We had our first flooding that I ever remember since 1985, a year and a half ago. Not this summer, but the last one before that.
And it'll spread a lot faster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this is from an article called "Socialists Must Fight the War Machine at Home" in the January edition of RedMadison, which is pretty rad. Yeah. Good analysis.
Well, if you guys hear really loud noises from the coming podcasts, then those are the F-35's.
Yeah, are we in the zone here?
We're.
Did you look at the?
Well, we're. I think that we're north enough that we hear them because we do hear definitely the ones that are already there every now and again.
Right.
But there was just one time in particular that we heard a really long, loud one that I've never heard before. So,
and I don't think I think it's going to get worse when the F-35's come.
Yeah, they're significantly louder.
I immediately thought of the signs no F-35's. I'm like, is this the F-35's? This is not fun.
Yeah,
it comes. Yeah, you hear it. And it's not just a second. So,
and it's called Safe Skies.
Safe Skies, Clean Waters is the coalition that's been carrying the brunt of the organizing. There's a big parade to Truex Field to protest F-35's coming up Saturday, February 29th.
Okay.
At noon.
Yeah, skip leap year or leap day or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you come out to meeting at Anderson and Wright, to the corner of Anderson and Wright, and then marching over to the military base, which is 4 blocks away. This is kind of a cool section because we're kind of going over the articles and kind of talking about them, and that was another idea that we were having is basically having RedMadison as a podcast kind of form, and I think this is kind of a sample of what that would be like. What do you think about doing something like that, just reading the articles, discussing them?
I think it'd be very cool, and especially like, you know, if you were willing to bring some of the authors of the articles on to talk about the pieces they've been working
absolutely.
on. Because, you know, like I said, the February edition's coming out in the next couple of days. I got to read through some of the finished articles today in preparation for publication.
Yeah.
There's some really good, sharp stuff coming out. Some stuff that I haven't read about elsewhere, you know, cuts to Medicaid services in Wisconsin, things like that. And I think it'd be hugely beneficial to have folks who have invested all of this time researching and writing about these particular things come on to talk about them.
Yeah,
No doubt.
absolutely. And one thing that is nice about, you know, a smaller setting like this is, you know, it's a smaller group. That's what drew me to this kind of thing. And, you know, if you're, you know, you're a little antisocial, just, you know, it's going to be weird in front of the mic the first time, but just, you know, try it out, you know, you know, just start talking and you'll be surprised at, you know, how eloquent you might sound. So, yeah, come on.
Yeah, we've had Alan Ruff on this, on like the Lil Guillotine podcast in the past.
Yeah.
That was a good episode.
I got to have him
Very
on
cool.
again sometime because it was really cramped last time.
Yeah, you got a better.
I like reset everything like after that episode.
I could maybe some more or maybe a butt cushion or some more
Yes.
comfortable chairs. You got the nice posh one over there.
Oh yeah, no, I spend a lot of time sending my ass through things, so
no doubt,
I
no doubt.
need a butt cushion. Yeah,
So I was
take
also
care of
going to
your
ask
back, people.
about like distribution. What kind of for RedMadison? So is it just the folks in the DSA that are getting it right now, or
Anybody can sign up for our newsletter. You can go to our website and there's a link. I think there's a link to sign up. I'll put one there if it's not there. But you can subscribe to our newsletter even if you're not in DSA, and we're building our own list independent of the organization. Because like I said, we really want to create a left space for all of Madison and not just DSA, but certainly largely featuring, you know, the work of members of DSA.
Yeah.
if folks want to sign up, it's there on the top. It's like the subscribe to email newsletter.
Great.
You got the MailChimp plugin. That was really pain in the butt to get that working. That's like a lot, to get the MailChimp plugin working.
Yes.
I know about that. I've struggled with that.
Yeah,
So,
it was a fun night.
Yeah.
WordPress, fun.
Right. So then let's see. What about ways have you what ways have you? So I do a lot of social media advertising. I've been studying it for a couple years now for my music stuff, which is pretty pivotal for getting music out there. Have you thought about, or what ways do you publicize it, or do you advertise it and whatnot? I don't know if you have a budget either. That's another question, I guess.
That's the hard part. Right?
Nope, no budget.
Yeah, right.
And
I think you're like pretty good about that stuff. I'm still trying to figure it out too.
Right.
yeah, we don't even have like our own social media channels right now. So it's our hope that we will work out a system by which we can use some of DSA's platforms. And I think that we should, this is a newsletter that is put together entirely by members of DSA. It's a significant portion. If you look at the total sum of the work that DSA members do in a month, in the last 2 months at least, RedMadison has constituted a significant portion of that pie. And so we should feature this work. And I'm very proud of it. I think lots of people in the organization are excited about it.
Yeah.
And so I hope we'll get a little smoother about promoting it via those social media channels. But I would say promotion has been a little, we're just getting started. It's one of the things I think we'll master down the road.
Well, if you're listening right now, go look up RedMadison and share it on your Facebook and social media.
It's
stuff,
redmadison.com.
Is that really it?
Yep.
Yeah.
So
You
that's
got
good. That's a
that?
good URL.
Yes.
It's a paid one, obviously, because you couldn't put the MailChimp plugin unless you have a paid
It's insane. to me.
WordPress
Oh.
site. So I know that somebody's paying for that. So how?
But yeah, go on and share it. There's a couple
Yeah,
articles. Share it with your people on Facebook. Start a conversation
Do we have?
and try to be good to each other. when
So
you're
I agree
conversating.
with you for the DSA meetings where it's like this whirlwind. We have like 90 minutes, and there's we have like 225 members. I think Andrew just sent an email about, and so it's
Yeah.
not all of them come, but there's like 30 plus people every
Between 30
meeting.
and 50. Were you at the last meeting, the January meeting?
No, I missed that one.
There were
Unfortunately,
at least 50 people in the room.
Wow,
It was a
yeah.
huge meeting. Yeah. So 90 minutes, 50 people. It's not a lot of time.
Yeah, you got like a little over a minute. Yeah. Can you give me a beer while you're out there? Thanks. Everyone heard that. I can edit. Anyways. So yeah, what was I gonna say? So yeah, so I think it's a good idea because there's not a space for having any political discussions whatsoever. That was a difference another thing I did like about the ISO was that we had 90-minute meetings every week, and so that's like 4 times as much. Plus a lot less people were coming to those meetings as well, so a lot more time to make arguments and explore political positions and stuff like that. Yeah, I appreciate the fact that there's a space for it now. Although also, are you I guess I'm kind of giving props to the DSA or what's the word? It's called plug in the DSA here, because it's like I'm in a working group of the Madison tenant power.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of space for that stuff there, because we have like under 10 people there in like a 90-minute meeting, and we meet every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so yeah, are you in what working groups are you in DSA, if you care to share?
I'm a member of People's Green New Deal, which is DSA Madison's environmental eco-socialist working group.
Yeah.
And similarly, we meet, every 2 weeks, and there's, between 5 and 10 of us at a time. And so it's a great place to have longer conversations and to do more of that learning that I think I miss from being in the ISO. The ISO's meetings we just used meetings in a different way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was excited to hear about Nick Estes. I think it's okay to mention that.
Yeah.
Who's a dope ass indigenous political theorists that's coming to town in Madison. People's Green New Deal is bringing, I don't know their pronouns, but they're bringing Nick to town, and so that's going to be a dope talk. Do you remember what date they're coming?
March 11th at the Labor Temple. I believe it's a 7 p.m. meeting, but you can go to People's Green New Deal Madison to see the event.
Oh, there's a website for that?
Yeah, we put
cool.
up a Facebook event just hours ago, so it's there. Yeah, Nick is a member of the Red Nation, and they came up with the Red Deal, which is not meant to, sort of compete or supersede the Green New Deal, but is meant to center Indigenous liberation within the framework of environmental justice, and as an essential piece of environmentalism and saving the planet. So it's very cool that he's going to be in town, and we're very lucky to, that he's willing to have a meeting with us. It's going to be a great event.
No doubt, and it's timely because the police in it's in British Columbia in the Wet'suwet'en territory, and I don't want to mess up the pronunciation, but in the spot where they're resisting the Pacific what is it called? The Pacific Coast gas line?
The natural gas pipeline that they want to put through tribal lands. Yeah.
So the cops are really ramping up repression there, and also, there was resistance on train. Like, folks were blocking trains all over Canada.
That was incredible, right? Like, both coasts were shut down to trains. Yeah. Yeah,
it's really powerful stuff. And I guess just recently, a day or two ago, there was sort of like right-wingers that came out and kind of broke up the encampment that was blocking one of the trains, and the police of course, just let it happen. So they're getting a lot of attention and repression as well. So it's definitely a timely thing happening. Hopefully the resistance will still be happening then.
Yeah.
And then what are some other DSA working groups that you can think of? We have like an electoral politics working group, which is like, sort of maybe a critique that you share with me about like getting involved in electoralism, but also like there's also a lot more benefit with I do think it's a lot more important to be involved with local electoral things, at least being, like you were mentioning, like on top of the sort of maneuvers that local politicians are doing here in town.
Yeah. So I'm actually really excited about the work that the Electoral Politics Working Group does in DSA, because I think that they sort of draw a line in the sand in Madison politics that hasn't been there for a while. Like, what does it mean to get an endorsement from DSA? You can't just be any old, pseudo-progressive. Like, you actually have to live up to a pretty high set of standards that they set. So last year, for example, they didn't endorse anybody except for Ananda Murilli. It was because Ananda went out of her way to say no cops in schools. Yeah. Nobody else was willing to say it. And so she got this endorsement from DSA. Well, that's pretty great, to have a line drawn in the sand that way.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very useful way of sort of illustrating the sides that exist in Madison that are usually able to, sort of hide just beyond view. They're usually kind of invisible, where we don't talk about the fact that actually there's business interests in Madison that conflict with the interests of regular folks. I think the Electoral Politics Working Group forces politicians to pick a side and therefore shows kind of where the sides are. And, we could talk all night about ways that they could do that differently or sort of enhance that. And I'm going to be interested to see how their work plays out in 2020 versus 2019. Because, I don't know how all of their endorsements and stuff are going, but we'll find out more about that soon.
Yeah.
One thing that was rad about them is they came to the Madison Tenant Power, which is the committee in the DSA. It wasn't back then, but they asked us sort of what things that we should demand of politicians who are running. And so that was a really cool way to sort of get our grassroots organizing to show up, as demands for politicians before they actually endorse them. So that's something that's new. And we were able to like tell them some really radical anti-landlord stuff, like we won't endorse folks who are landlords, or like what kind of money are you getting from development corporations and landlords and things like that. So yeah, I thought that was powerful.
Well, what's cool is sometimes you might even be bringing up something that hasn't been brought up yet, and sometimes they will listen and think about it and be like, oh, I had not considered that aspect to this thing. So yeah, it's something that is especially on like really a local level, it can be a very powerful thing. Because you can actually potentially talk to some of the people that are being elected into local offices, which is, different than, the national stage. I think that's like one of the first problems that people have when trying to, get involved in politics in the first place is like they have that, federal mindset and like they think about the presidential elections as like the most important thing and all the other ones are, But yeah, the local electoral stuff is, I always, even if people have problems with voting, I'm always like, just the local stuff is like, can be important.
Yeah, and even on the national level, it's like, there's ways that I think we all have to be involved in electoral politics, and I don't think it's campaigning personally. I think it's being there, because basically, in the case of Bernie, right, and he's doing fucking phenomenal, like, wow, just smashed it in Nevada, like blowing shit out of the water.
Killing it.
So first of all, I guess if you want him to get the Democratic nomination, there's going to be some work to do, like at the Democratic National Convention for one, but then more importantly, there's going to be some work to do if, say, he wins the presidential election. There's going to be a lot of work to do to hold him accountable to the promises he was making, because he's going to be hamstrung by the system that he's working in. Yeah. Also, he's going to be like the most militaristic, imperialist, socialist in the history of the world at that point, because he's going to have control over one of the the hugest military in all of human history that is responsible for some really horrible shit. So there's going to need to be some organizing.
That's really going to test like the ideals. You know what I mean? How strong those ideals are.
I don't want to spoil it, but there's a piece in the February edition of RedMadison that touches on that very topic, and I think it's great. It's super sharp.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
I made a TikTok video about it, 15 seconds long.
Nice.
A few.
I would say, like, I can tell election season is very much underway, because I went on Facebook the other day, and almost every Facebook post was something about the election in some respect.
Yeah.
So it's people are definitely getting more and more excited about what's going on.
Or is it just Zuckerberg
or paying more and more attention?
Just Zuckerberg fake newsing us, showing us what he wants us to see.
Who really knows anymore?
The algorithms.
That's why you always have to check your sources. You always got to be vigilant, no matter how much you trust whatever,
But yeah, Zuckerberg was showing me post after post after post of, Bernie shit. But also it's like, it's an interesting time with how
I mean, it probably has your like profile or whatever. They know you're like remotely leftist. So They're gonna throw a bunch of Bernie your way.
Yeah, he's really breaking the electability like mantras in half for sure.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. I'm still kind of surprised that he's doing as well as he is. So, but what do you got going on in the near future, Lil Guillotine? You got any shows coming up?
We're talking about plugs.
Well, yeah, if that's where you were going.
Plugs. Let's do plugs. Let's do some plugs.
Yeah, plugs.
Let's do that. So I don't have any hip hop shows coming up scheduled at this.
How was your most recent one? I didn't get to make it out.
The most recent one was great. There was like 80 people came out to there. I wasn't the only performer. It was sort of like a showcase. It was a fundraiser for the bail fund, the Free the 350 bail fund. And we end up raising $1,800 that night. And so that was a successful fundraiser in my opinion.
Yeah. Bail fund's still going strong, right?
Yeah. So one plug that is kind of relevant to what you were talking about for sexual harassment. I'm really proud of this sexual harassment restorative justice workshop that we have ongoing in the General Defense Committee. We're going to be meeting this Sunday at 4:30 p.m. at the Social Justice Center and doing the second half of it. And so basically we did a bunch of readings on sort of like how basically like sexual harassment, sexual assault in leftist communities and sort of like how they happen and like an abolitionist perspective on them. So it's like not, it's a tendency of folks who are on the left to, if they hear about sexual assault it's like automatically going to sort of, I'm going to call the cops, I want them to go to prison, or I want to kill them or beat feminism. Them. Yeah, it's carceral logic, that whereas opposed to like a restorative justice logic. Doesn't necessarily mean that you need these people in your spaces, but it doesn't mean that like we're going to commit violence upon them as a way to get justice, because that really doesn't do anything. And absolutely, like, abolitionist perspective, jailing someone does very little, if nothing at all, to gain justice for the community or the people that were harmed.
You stop the thinking at the point when they go into prison. It's like you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
You guys read The Revolution Starts at Home, right?
That's what we read, yeah.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. It's such a great book.
Yeah, you read that too?
Yeah.
Cool.
Who's that by again?
Many authors.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember who the editors are, but it's a compilation of essays from different left organizations and circles that have worked on a restorative justice model to deal with, sexual assault, sexual harassment, sort of like
I need to check that out.
Misbehavior in left spaces. It's really great.
Yeah.
And then CV developed a workshop based on it, and
nice.
And it's gonna be getting edited a couple times, but we're gonna share it with like the broader leftist community pretty soon. That's something that, because I'm so impressed by it that I just want to get it out there for everybody, in the IWGDC and in the left in general.
You
not just
CV?
leftists.
Yeah.
CV's dope.
It's really great, and developing a framework for dealing with these things if they haven't happened here locally, yet. Although non-sexual harassment things that restorative justice are applicable to obviously have happened.
Yeah. I think, I will disagree and say that it happens all the time.
Yeah.
And like, definitely, like, there were a number of occasions. I want to be clear that I'm not talking about sexual assault. I'm not saying that sexual assault is rampant in left spaces, although it absolutely does happen. But like, sexist behavior and sexual harassment are like features of being alive. And so like, certainly they happen in left spaces. And like, as, a leader in the local branch of the ISO, it was the thing that I had to contend with kind of regularly, like, what do we do about this person's sexist behavior, or like, what about this person who makes everyone uncomfortable, or there were some like extremely difficult scenarios that came up, and I would have benefited so much from a program like the one that you're talking about that your comrade developed. So I'm very excited to hear that that's what you're working on.
You're right.
That can be that's very important, because some people do need that really straightforward, like, information about that,
Well, and the idea that people are redeemable and that they still belong, that they could still belong in left spaces is so important. Right. I think that part of the reason that folks are so reticent to not only believe people about sexism and sexual harassment that they've experienced, but to take it seriously, is because we have attached these stakes to misdeeds that are so high that people are terrified of imposing them on other people, right? Yeah. Whereas if we took an approach of like, folks are not irredeemable, we're not going to sentence this person to exile or, incarceration for 1 billion years. We're not going to, destroy somebody's life over this stuff. I think that we could take it seriously without being afraid.
Well, yeah, because sometimes that's part of the reason that someone doesn't come forward is because they are afraid of the backlash that person will
that's right.
experience.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be responsible for that. So they want, sometimes it holds people back from doing the right thing.
Right. Like if your choice is say nothing or have somebody expelled from an organization that matters to them.
Without any sort of in between.
Right. There have to be other options. There have to be better options in there.
Yeah.
And, not to say that expulsion isn't sometimes appropriate. Like, I think that is true. And, it's not, you're not entitled to left spaces, So if your behavior is egregious enough, you can go. But certainly some people, like, can work through whatever their shit is that's causing them to act out in egregious ways.
And it's important that they do it, either whether it be through that space or some space in the future. That's important for all of us to face our imperfections like that and try to get better.
That brings up something. So it was called the article in the January RedMadison called Harassment and Grievance Officers and Their Important Role in Creating a Socialist Future. There was one thing, and I think it's great that the DSA has this because, other organizations don't necessarily have a focus like this. There was one thing that I kind of was feeling like maybe could use a little better wording where it was talking about the officer's role is to create solutions to the problems. Where it's like, I was just add that. There's not necessarily like a solution that will happen, but there like mediation definitely. Ideally, even then that won't always work as well, depending on like where people are at or whatever. But it's there's not always a solution, which is the bad, which is the tough reality. But that was a great article. I'm glad that y'all had that. That was
and are you guys looking for a officer? Was that what it was saying?
I think so, right?
Yeah, one of our officers stepped down. They became they got elected to a different position in DSA and don't want to hold two positions. So we are looking for another harassment and grievance officer. Yeah. I will say that like part of the reason that I was willing to join DSA is because they were talking about this stuff and having conversations about how do we deal with like harassment
and
in
nationally
the organization.
too.
Yeah. And I just the experience of being a woman alive in the being alive in the world means that I'm very cynical and skeptical about I just sort of assume that things are going to go, there's going to be harassment and I don't know that it's going to be handled well. I just feel very deeply cynical about that stuff, but I felt at least good that there's an infrastructure because in the ISO there wasn't there was infrastructure, but it was the branch committee, which frankly meant that I personally that I got to deal with a lot of that stuff over and over again, with the assistance of other women, and non-binary folks in the ISO.
Yeah.
And that's sort of classic, social reproduction sexism.
Yeah.
It's not healthy. So I think having designated folks to do that work in an organization is really important because otherwise it becomes the default role, I think, of, women in the organization.
Yeah, and without really taking into account whether they're equipped or want to do that, right? It just kind of came upon you as the female members of the branch committee. Is that what you were kind of saying?
Or even just of the branch. I think the folks who are first impacted by sexual harassment and other sort of gender-based misconduct in an organization are people right who are women, right? We're going to be the ones to experience that sort of thing, and so it becomes sort of incumbent without any outside infrastructure to deal with it. It becomes incumbent on us to solve that problem by ourselves. And so you actually need a plan for how to deal with that stuff when it happens. Otherwise you're leaving it entirely on your members who are going to be subjected to special oppressions to solve the problem of those oppressions, and that's not acceptable or sustainable.
Reproducing gender roles of the capitalist society
Yeah.
and the, the nuclear family and the hierarchical power structures of fucking, like in the housewife roles and whatnot, and so, folks who are we're supposed to be responsible for social reproduction duties. That
was one of my first meetings. That's actually, I think, my first meeting with the ISO was about that, like women all over the world.
Was it Sharon Smith was there that day?
It wasn't Sharon Smith. I can't remember the name.
Was it Tiffy?
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was. It was in a bigger room too. There was like a party that night, but. That was such a great, eye-opening talk for me that it, made me want to even go to the party with some strangers. It was all about, social reproduction and how, even with women in like, third world countries or something, like they're expected to do both like a job and the house duties still. You know what I mean? So. Even though you'd think that, whatever industrialization should change those roles, instead those women just do more and more and more. But yeah, it was a great talk though that I think that, anyone that wants to understand this stuff should look into social reproduction. It's a fascinating subject that if you're a working person, like you need to know about social reproduction because like you need to have social reproduction.
It's been like a central focus on in the General Defense Committee. We've done several readings on Sylvia Federici's like Wages Against Housework, which is how she ended up like remastering the demand in answer to like a lot of critiques, including ones from Angela Davis in her book Women, Race, and Class, which I'm technically in mid plug, so I did. It
is a long plug section.
Yeah, right. No, that's cool. No, I just wanted to mention that because I'm going to plug that I just finished Women, Race, and Class audiobook, and you can peep that on my YouTube. Lil Guillotine. So there's 13 chapters, and it's Angela Davis does a good job at talking about how social reproduction ends up affecting black women differently in different ways, and how industrialization created the role of the housewife, but that sort of like escaped or sort of like became an additional role for folks who are black women in society. So check that out. It's like, I don't think there's any other audiobooks of it. I did not get her permission to do it. I'm not selling it, but she's a communist, so I feel like she was probably okay with the information being out there.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, I think that mostly, hopefully, they just want it to be more accessible. So
yeah,
because I'd assume it costs money to get someone to do your audio book.
And she did do an audiobook of her book that's on Haymarket Books. It's like Something is a Constant Struggle, it's called.
Freedom is a Constant Struggle.
Yeah. She did an audiobook, and it's available on Audible herself of that one, but
support her that
not
way
of her other ones.
Want.
I've also done Our Prison's Obsolete, which is a very I think it's 2004 Women, Race, and Classes from 1985. Which is very like really good pivotal work on abolitionist politics that everyone needs to read or listen to. So some other plugs real quick is so there's a young woman in Kenosha County named Crystal Kaiser. Are you familiar with them? So Crystal Kaiser is a young black woman who was being sex trafficked by an older white man. And in self-defense, she like defended herself against this extreme violence that this white man was putting her through. And this white man ended up dying. And the state ended up arresting Crystal Kaiser, and they're charging her with homicide, not like acknowledging the fact that she has a right to self-defense in this violent situation. And they put a $1 million bail on Crystal Kaiser, which is unjust. They recently had it reduced to $400,000 a couple of weeks ago, which was the result of massive social movements, including like national attention that was gotten. But I think it's part and parcel of the fact that like black women's bodies are so like even though we live in an extremely violent society where the majority of people will be willing to call the police in order to resolve conflicts, and the police of course have the right to deadly escalation, and so like also like people are really complacent with the sort of like imperialist military, and a lot of folks are like supporting our troops without any kind of critiques of the imperialist military. So we have a very violent society here in the United States. Even though we have that violent society, we still like consistently don't acknowledge black women's right to self-defense. It's like it's a consistent thing in the society. And like Afro-pessimist theory talks about how that's because like the black body is seen as something that is like owed or owned by society, and like whiteness posits itself against the black body, and so violence on black body is a necessary precondition for whiteness to exist in society, because without it there would be no like existence of whiteness, and there would be no sort of because otherwise like whiteness wouldn't exist, and also white folks who have like light skin like wouldn't like have a normalcy and wouldn't feel sort of like accepted or like they can exist. And so I think it's part and parcel that the state is put this $1 million bail on this black woman who is performing self-defense to the fact that like black women's bodies are not deemed to exist except for an antithesis to whiteness. So that's some heavy Afro-pessimist theoretical stuff. So that's Crystal Kaiser's case. And on March 16th in Kenosha County, the folks who are organizing in defense of Crystal Kaiser are having they're going to pack the courthouse in Kenosha County, and then they're going to have a picket later that day. So in support of that, the General Defense Committee, we're having a meal fundraiser to pay for legal defense for Crystal Kaiser on March 15th, so the Sunday before that, at 4:30 p.m. at Social Justice Center, which is a theme for us. We're always on Sundays at 4:30 p.m. at Social Justice Center any week. You can come and find us there if you'd like, in Madison. And we're going to have meals. We're going to have women of color, black women, and folks who are survivors of sexual assault giving speeches, and we're going to be serving quality food in like exchange for donations to pay for. We're organizing with folks who are organizing the stuff in Kenosha, not Milwaukee. It's just the south of Milwaukee. So come out to that March 15th, 4:30 p.m. at Social Justice Center. That's a lot of plugs for me, or at least a lot of words.
They're so great, though.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great.
Well, how about some plugs for you? Do you have any plugs?
Look to RedMadison.com for February editions coming out in the next couple of days. DSA is having a meeting. Well, this won't come out before DSA's meeting.
Yeah, I don't think so, because I got to edit it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be like a week or so, right?
Tomorrow. Yeah.
So my biggest plug is that, the Air Force is trying to base F35's in Madison, which is disastrous for working class families on the north and east side. It's actually like absurd, the amount of burden that our local government, our federal government is willing to impose on working class families with this decision. And so if folks can make it Saturday, February 29th at noon, we're going to parade to Truax Field and protest the decision to bring F-35s here. And I just want to say quickly that contrary to what has been in the press throughout Madison, this is not a done deal, and that there are lots of opportunities to sort of throw a wrench in the works, not just to stop the F-35s, but even just to stop the military from beginning construction at Truax Field, which will worsen PFAS contamination. There's many opportunities to pressure our local elected officials to do the right thing, and to make it difficult for the Air Force to proceed with this plan, which is, going to harm a lot of good people who don't deserve it, didn't ask for this.
And in ways that we can't really even anticipate. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, we know like a little bit of what might happen, but
right. I mean, even with PFAS contamination itself, like the science is still out on how this affects human beings. It's in all of our blood, PFAS. All of us have PFAS in our blood at this point.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
We don't know what that means in the long term. So, there's no reason to go ahead with this. It's a, terrible mistake.
Yeah.
I think I will have it out before Saturday at noon, right in Anderson.
Okay.
Come out to that.
Nice.
Any more plugs?
That's it.
I just have my usual plugs.
Right on.
Yeah. My other podcasts. So check out Rolling Stone podcast. Hopefully, I will have another episode in the works by the time this comes out. Hero Worship and the album concept hour. The latest episode will be the Frank Sinatra in the Wee Small Hours.
Oh, nice.
And Run the Jewels first album is coming up soon. So check that out. We also got Jake the Snake on the Lake recently in the studio for our podcast. He has a local radio show called Under the Covers. Check him out if you want to listen to some cool cover songs and get some music history. But he's going to be on a podcast coming up soon. So
right on.
Yeah. If you like music, check out that stuff.
I got a song coming out Friday called Shock Doctrine. Folks should
nice.
pre-save that on Spotify or whatever.
Well, and you have an EP out now, too, like two, right?
I have two,
right now?
Yeah.
You have two out now?
And I have like 4 more songs in the works with a bunch of different artists from around the country, different anarchists and communists. And
where are those songs available?
They're not available anywhere yet. I haven't made them yet, but they're in the.
I was going to say, I have a
physical
copy of one of yours, but.
Yeah, no, I got it. You can email me. And then RedMadison.com. Check it out.
Yeah, check it out. Yeah, RedMadison.
That's what's up.
Still surprised that's available.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's Communist Madison's. Thanks for Dayna and Brad for joining us, and thanks for listening to the.
Me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Lil Guillotine podcast. Peace out, y'all. Cheers.